rich man's world. I have turned the soul of
We're currently sitting on the floor in Launch House. Namaste. This is actually, this morning, a group of us sat here and we were doing breathing exercises for 10 minutes.
Cool.
Before going into an ice bath in the bathtub over
Wow,
there.
okay.
Yeah. So, like, I've done, like, this is actually, like, literally I've been sitting here with, like, my fingers on my knees, like,
Okay, so you've been in this position all day.
Yeah, pretty much all day.
Perfect. Glad I could join.
But thank you for coming. You are such an incredible person. So Allie, just so for people who don't know, you're the senior lead at Microsoft. You've worked at LinkedIn for design. You worked at LinkedIn. You now live in Tel Aviv, maybe doing some back and forth, we'll see, from New York too. And just an incredible person. I'm so happy that I met you. So thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Of course. Yeah, I'm so glad I met you as well. I feel like people with similar energy tend to find each other. So
Totally.
I'm really glad that we connected in Tel Aviv and now in New York and hopefully in other places in the world as well.
Yeah, totally. So I would love to talk about you and about your background and about how you built your life and your career and everything that makes you you. So do you want to start a little bit with telling the listeners about your work job at like LinkedIn and working in San Francisco and how you kind of had the courage to just pick up your life and move to Tel Aviv and start everything out there?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
So as you mentioned, I'm originally from the U.S. I'm from California.
Right.
I grew up there, went to school at UC San Diego, and right out of college, I got into a rotational program at LinkedIn. I had studied sociology because I am interested in understanding how we behave as humans. And I also studied design as well. And I always had this technological inclination. And I think that when I was in school, I was a little afraid to actually jump into a discipline like computer science because even at that time, it was still very male dominated. And I shied away from it, but it was only as I was entering my first job inside of the tech industry did I start to take more courses and become more technical. And it was during my rotational program that I really understood the benefit of having technical skills and how important that actually is. And especially within the design sphere, because as designers, we are designing for technology. And if we don't know how technology is built, then we can't be the best designers, especially if we're digital product designers that we can possibly be, which actually led me to going to Tel Aviv. So I was 23 years old, working at LinkedIn, very comfortable in San Francisco, had my family in the Los Angeles area, all my friends from high school and college. And then I heard about this program in Tel Aviv to basically bring together young tech professionals from all over the world in order to expand our technical toolbox. In my case, it was a coding boot camp. So I joined this boot camp for 5 months. I told my parents I was leaving my perfect job in San Francisco to go be a student again, and not even a student in a master's degree, but just a student in a boot camp. And though they're very supportive, they were a little apprehensive and told me, okay, you can go, but you're on your own. Like you're going to support yourself and, you know, either you'll make it or you'll come back here, but either way, it'll be a great experience. And I really felt in my soul that this was the right decision. There was something really pushing me forward to doing this. So I went to the boot camp, spent 5 months learning to code, made some really cool projects. And at that point, I decided I didn't want to be a pure developer and I didn't want to be a pure designer, but I wanted to do something kind of in the middle and hybrid. And then I got a job in Tel Aviv doing exactly that. So for the first 3-4 years that I was in Tel Aviv, my roles were hybrid technical and design roles. So I was developing a lot of the designs that I was actually creating.
Yeah, that's so much fun. I'm like that too. I love the design side of things and the technical side of things too. And that's, I think, another reason we can talk so easily with each other because we're like, wait, you do know this and you know that. And so it's so nice to be able to like, those people exist, you know?
Yeah,
which
definitely.
is really cool.
Yeah, they exist. And I think that that's one of the really interesting things about going to Tel Aviv for me is that people are so creative and they're so willing to learn new things. And really not afraid to fail. So you go there and you decide that you want to learn a new skill set and you want to, pivot and transition. And I think there's just this open-minded nature of people to want to help you and want to kind of help navigate this path that you might be on that might not be the linear paths that we know in the US to be kind of like how we would think we would develop our careers, but allowing us to kind of expand our skill sets and go into something a little bit more hybrid, a little bit more connected in the sense that you're not just specializing in one particular area, but you're bringing in multiple skill sets to really shape your career and develop it in one way, and then maybe specializing later and pivoting into something else afterwards. So I think that's a very cool Israeli way of thinking about, career progression in general.
And that reminds me, honestly, a little bit of like my school, Stanford, because they actually don't really allow you to declare your major until after your sophomore year.
Wow.
Because like the president, he encourages everybody to just explore and see what you like. And that totally is like Tel Aviv and Israel's mentality for sure, about just everybody traveling for 6 months after serving and just like exploring. That's a big part of like the life there and the culture. And so it's cool that you got to experience that. And I think something that you said that was really interesting is that when you're in college, you didn't really want to go down the technical route because you didn't feel like you're capable to do it, / there's men taking up so much space there. But as a designer, you still had, once you actually explored that area, you realize that anybody can do it. You can do it in particular, and how important it is to have those skills. And so I think a lot of people that I know, in particular, they are designers or they're more creative people, and therefore they don't feel like they can go into the tech space. So do you have any advice that you can give to those people on how to break down the idea that you have to be like a math and science person to be a tech person?
Yeah, definitely. So I know when I was in college, I was so focused on, again, this linear way of thinking. Like, I have to get good grades because grades matter, because they mean something. And I was afraid that if I took cognitive science and more physics and higher level math classes, that I wouldn't get good grades, and that would be a reflection on me as a person. But I think that where I've stepped away from and what's helped me so much in my career is this idea that you don't have to be the best in a particular domain to have curiosity in it. You can explore it, and you can decide that you don't like it, and then you can move to something else, or you can do something and not be the best at it. Like, I do programming, and by no means am I a great programmer, but I like to develop things in a hacky way because I like the autonomy of what it allows me to create. And then I can find myself on this path where even if I'm specializing in digital product design, I can understand concepts of different skills that I've learned, even if I'm not, a world-class programmer. So my advice would be, don't be afraid to fail. Actually, failing is a great thing because it means that you stepped out of your comfort zone and you tried something new. And that's actually one of the reasons I admire you so much for putting on this podcast, because I think a lot of times as creatives, we have ideas of things we want to do, but we're afraid, what if it doesn't do well? What if people don't respond well to it? But just the fact that you're going out and doing something and satiating this curiosity, even if you get a bad grade or you build, a project that completely fails, or you put something out there that isn't well received by the public, you went forward with something that you were excited and passionate about, and that will lead you in a direction that ultimately you'll find, your North Star. And I think that had been the case for me coming out of this boot camp. Even though I didn't become a programmer, I found a specialized area in which I could really excel, even if I wasn't the best programmer in the world, because it led me down to meet all these interesting people that ended up shaping my career so much. So my advice is just go towards what you're excited and passionate about, and give yourself the space and forgiveness to explore those things without the fear of judgment from others or from yourself, or this failure that we like to think about in society today.
Totally. I think like that ties really well into the theme of this podcast, which is faking it. And faking it is just kind of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, figuring it out, and then actually making something happen despite knowing what you're doing. And I think especially for women, this is a prominent issue where women are just scared to kind of risk things. They're scared of facing rejection. It's not really in our societal norms for women to approach and go ask what they want. Like the stereotype is that men ask you to go out on a date. They're used to getting rejected. Women are used to being asked for a promotion, not asking themselves, you know? And so I think it's like harder for us in a sense because it's not really encouraged throughout our lives, but it's really cool that you're able to kind of face that and also like give this message of how other people can face that too.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks for that.
I always say that, I really, even though I'm American, I feel like I really grew up in Israel. Cool. In the sense that I spent the last 6 years there, these really pivotal years from my early to late 20s. Yeah. And I think that this mentality of just really pushing forward and putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations, like you said, taking months of uncertainty after a big life event like the end of university or the end of the army or the end of a relationship or whatever it may be, to really allow yourself to explore and really go forth with fearlessness, whether or not you're faking it.
Right, totally.
I remember one of the most impactful events that happened to me both in my personal life and my career was when I had met some people that had invited me to go trekking with them in Nepal right after my first degree. And I was not a trekker or a nature woman by any means. I actually brought makeup with me on the mountain, which was ridiculous because I obviously never wore it and it just added weight to my pack.
Yeah, that's so funny.
But I ended up...
mascara, like what?
Like what was I thinking? Like I was actually like, it's freezing and we're hiking for 12 hours a day. I'm going to put concealer on. Obviously I did not do this and I got better later on and ended up trekking in Alaska and doing other hikes. And I learned, which is important. I was 21, so I forgive myself for that.
Of course.
But it was one of those things where, I was terrified. Like as I was flying into Kathmandu, I was terrified at the fact that I didn't know how to trek. I didn't know if what I brought was right. By the way, everything I brought was all wrong. And I suffered the first trek I ever did. But I think it's this idea that having the confidence to know that if you have the determination, you're going to make it. Yeah. And it really is on theme with your podcast, faking it, because that's what we do so much in our lives, whether it be, a trek in Nepal or, moving to a new country, not speaking the language and just trying to make it and get jobs and say, yeah, I can do this, even though you have no idea how and you have to Google the whole thing, or taking jobs that are far above where your experience level is. And then just knowing that you're gonna figure it out. And I think that that's a mentality that I actually really learned and solidified during these years abroad and has really benefited me in my career today, working with the US and also, working internationally.
Right. Yeah. And I think that in particular, like the theme of you being able to do all these things is, it sounds like kind of having a trust in yourself, that no matter where you are, it's you in that situation and you'll figure it out, kind of. And so for somebody who may not have that trust in themselves, do you have any advice on like how they can have that self-certainty that they'll be okay? Or
yeah, definitely. So actually, I think one of the people that instilled that the most in me is my dad.
Oh, cool.
So I grew up with 3 brothers, and my dad always treated me very much the same as all my brothers.
Right.
He put my brothers in basketball. He put me in basketball. I was terrible, so bad. I didn't even make a basket one season, and I wanted to quit. And he told me, "No, you're gonna finish this." Yeah. And my whole life, when I would say, "Daddy, can you do this for me?" He's like, "You're a strong girl. You can do this yourself." Right. And I think it was, that pushing to the limit of feeling like you are capable, you are strong, you are in all terms equal to your brothers really helped me gain that confidence. And even in moments when I was really afraid, I would just repeat that mantra, like, you've done scary things before. Like, this is just another scary thing. You're going to be okay. And even in moments when I find myself, really fearful because of, maybe I'll lose my apartment because my landlord might want to, you know, raise the rent a ton, or maybe I won't get this job that I'm up for because every other candidate is so much more qualified and older than me and more experienced.
Right.
Or, you know, I want to take this trip and I'm doing it alone, and, you know, will I be okay? Will I find my way?
Right.
And it's just knowing that, you know, if you can do it, if I can do it, then you can do it as well. Like, we're all equally capable, and we do come from different backgrounds and different experiences. But I think having the confidence to know that other women who are no more athletic or intelligent or brave than you really are, if you really go down deep, we've done it. So you can do it as well. And just knowing that, you know, there is a supportive community of people that want to help each other, really truly giving advice and helping and mentoring each other is such a strong feeling. And really through the internet, like all the social platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. I feel like people are closer within reach to be able to provide that support now more than ever.
Definitely. I think in the tech industry in particular, at least I felt kind of this like sisterhood almost, where all these women who are in this space that is male dominated, we all kind of are there for each other. We help each other with connections and do everything we can, which is so nice. And it should be like that in all industries and all environments. And something that I think you said about your dad that's really cool is that he kind of, in a sense, like forced you to be doing things that you didn't want to be doing, and then that taught you that you could do things that you didn't want to do or you weren't comfortable with. And so maybe a kind of trick for people to kind of adopt this belief in themselves is to start small, find something that they're uncomfortable doing, realize that they can do it, and just kind of increase and slowly increment the discomfort of whatever the task is, whether it's learning how to code or learning how to play basketball or just anything, and then kind of learning that they can do things that they didn't believe that they can do with time. So I think that's really cool.
Definitely. So when I actually worked at LinkedIn, there was a couple company values that really stood out to me. And this is so funny that I'm talking about this as if they're my own values, because it's like a very corporate thing. Company values. Yeah. But what I thought was actually amazing is that I think that, you know, one of the strengths of kind of putting those super relatable values as something that everyone can kind of live by as a mantra is it's really inspiring. And one of the big things, or values they had was about taking intelligent risks. So when I moved to Tel Aviv, it was a risk, but I would say it was an intelligent risk, because I wasn't going there to work, you know, on a farm, which would have also been okay if my goals were to go into agriculture. But I was going there to go to a coding boot camp. And I said to myself, whether I succeed or I fail, either way, I'm going to gain a valuable skill set and meet new people. And so therefore, it's an intelligent risk. So that was one thing. The other thing was, or is, that relationships matter. So I've found that through every opportunity I've ever had in my life, it has been through relationships, either first degree relationships or second degree relationships or even third degree relationships. Even how you and I met through a relationship. Exactly. Fostering those relationships for women especially is so important. And that kind of leads into my own personal philosophy that you and I have spoke about, which is live in generosity. And I think generosity can take multiple forms, but it's really about paying it forward. I've had so many people who have helped me throughout my career and who have taken a chance on me. And so I try to really be very mindful about carving out time to help other people, whether it be recommending them for a job or sending over useful pieces of information when it comes into my hands, or even ending most conversations when I first meet someone or I'm getting to know someone, which is like, let me know how else I can be helpful to you. And I think that just living in this space where it's a very genuine form of generosity, it really help shape the relationship that you have to people, because then you are in the constant state of giving. And I found that when you're in that constant state of giving, then people also want to give. And it becomes this really beautiful reciprocal relationship of you giving and then you paying it forward, and then the world kind of just opens up to you in that way, as opposed to people that feel potentially threatened or they want to kind of hold all their information inwards, then the world starts to close off to them as well. So I think if I have any personal advice from just the things I've learned in my career, living in generosity, you know, personal generosity, professional generosity is something that is really beneficial for us as people and especially as women as well.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of just open source, like the concept. And for those who don't know, open source means just like sharing code and people building libraries and code on top of other people's code, and just kind of the shared ecosystem of my resources are your resources. Let's all build together. And I guess that applies too to like the workplace and relationships and jobs. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there any like concerns about getting taken advantage of or giving too much? Like, how do you find the balance in that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it definitely is something that happens, and it's kind of a risk that, again, like taking intelligent risks, it's a risk that it just comes with the territory. Yeah, sometimes you will, you know, be in a situation where you give a lot and you don't receive anything in return. And, you know, you could get taken advantage of, either getting underpaid or not paid, or someone taking credit for your work. But I've found that, you know, for as many times as this has happened, it's really more of an outlier than the norm. And so even if it happens, I think it's still worth it to try to keep that mentality as much as possible of openness, like openness of mind, openness of spirit, this, you know, living in generosity, both personally and professionally. I can give you a great example of someone that I've worked with that has really been a role model for me in this sense in the Web3 community.
Oh, cool.
Actually.
Perfect.
So, there's an artist and designer who's the CEO of a company I advise for called Bueno. And for many, many years before he even entered into Web3, he was providing tons of open source design libraries.
That's so cool.
And designers were using his illustrations for many years. And he became really well known in the space for giving to the community. And he actually built his personal brand on just giving to the community.
That's so cool.
And so when it came time for him to start a company, and then that company shifted into a Web3 company that empowered creators to build NFT projects. It's a NFT creator platform. This particular person and the whole company was already very strategically placed as, you know, a giver of resources and information, which was exactly aligned with the brand that the company hopes to serve to provide to the community. So I think that, you know, it wasn't intentional that this was going to happen. It happened over the course of years. But I think that, you know, by building a professional brand as someone who is a giver and someone who really contributes to the community and to personal relationships, this can only benefit us as a whole, but even just, you know, as individuals as well, because people want to work with you then. If you're someone who's fun to work with, which goes into another part of my philosophy, which is just, you know, whatever you're doing, make sure you're having fun doing it.
Totally. Because
you'll just be happier, and everyone around you will really feel that, and you'll collaborate so much better, and your output and your productivity will be so much better as well. So I think that these are things that sometimes as women, especially me in the beginning of my career, I was so focused on being taken seriously all the time. I think I forgot to have fun a lot of the times. So again, living in generosity, having fun, and really, you know, creating communities and giving and contributing to those communities that we're in, whether it be coding or design. This is something that can only help us in our careers.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I even saw some data recently that I think it's only 11% of job applicants come from like online, just like job postings, and 90% comes from referrals. Which is just shows how much it's really about human connection and networking and kind of like giving and taking and just all of that. So, and just the relationship side of working in life. For the most part too. So I want to talk a little bit more about your involvement in Web3, how you got involved, what you do in the space, and why you care about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So I know Web3 is another way that you and I connected. So it's really cool to be able to talk about it with you. Mm-hmm. So my involvement with Web3 actually came about around the time as my move to Tel Aviv.
Cool.
So it all started when I moved to Tel Aviv and I had no friends. I spoke zero Hebrew. I just showed up
Yes.
in October of 2016. Like, okay, I'm here.
Hi, I'm Israeli now.
Hi, yeah. It took me another year to become officially Israeli, but I just showed up. And
awesome.
so it was in October of 2016.
Yeah.
I heard through some online forum that there was going to be a hackathon through a Colombian bank that was looking at what is the best way that we can help individuals without bank accounts get remittances. And so this was around the time that Bitcoin was still at around $600 USD, and it hadn't really, gone through that upward trajectory of more mainstream adoption, if you could call it today mainstream adoption, but for as much as it is. So I joined this hackathon, came to a random team and just said, hey, like, I'm a designer. Do you want to work with me?
Yeah.
And we built a product that ended up placing third out of, we were maybe like 100 or 150 people in the hackathon. Yeah. So our prize was a Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
And so
also, want to explain what a hackathon is for people who don't know?
Yes. So a hackathon is a fun event for nerds like Miriam and myself.
Yeah, love hackathons.
Love them. That love to create. And you come together for 24 or 48 hours, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, and just build a project exactly how the name implies. You hack it. You just hack a project. Yeah. So we came together, this team, this hodgepodge team of a product manager, 2 developers, myself as the designer, and we created actually an application to allow people to save together. And be able to transfer among different communities and to, save for, again, this is more for like the urban Colombian community. So maybe they want to buy a piece of farm equipment or buy a cow together. And so this was kind of an idea we had. And so we placed third. And actually the team that placed first, they were sending cryptocurrency through Facebook Messenger. Oh, wow. So this was like the early stages of this back in 2016.
Yeah, that's super early.
So this is how I initially got into Web3, was through this hackathon. Wow. So anyway, I didn't have a crypto wallet at the time, so I had to create one back then. Cool. And that's essentially how I got into crypto. And then throughout the years, crypto started becoming more popular. Yeah. Again, Israel is small. People heard about the work I had done in the hackathon. They brought me on for various projects, from gaming to cybersecurity. I had worked on a couple different things. And then I had started advising for a friend's company called Blush. It was called Blush at the time, and they did generative illustrations.
Oh, I love that.
So the generative illustration company ended up pivoting into creator tools for the Web3 community. And so that happened about a year ago. And that's how I got into NFTs, was through working with this company. And all at the same time, I had actually for several years been making art using machine learning. This is like pre-DALL-E, using like VQGAN plus Clip. Yeah, exactly. And so for my final project in grad school, I actually created this NFT collection, and I created this workshop where we would use text to image generation, and we actually minted the images that we created in the workshop together as a group that were representative of significant life experiences that people had gone through. Wow. And I called it tokenizing experiences and minting memories. And that's basically what we were doing, in line with, when you go through one of these programs like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or something like that, and you get this physical token saying, you've been sober for 30 days or for 180 days, and you can actually see that physical token and feel really proud of what you've accomplished. I thought about doing it very similar in the digital world with NFTs, being able to tokenize these images of an experience you went through, and then that image being representative of how much growth you've actually had as a person, and being able to exchange it between people. So instead of just telling someone about yourself, you can actually just send them this NFT that you created.
Right.
So it was this idea that, kind of evolved from a company I'd been working for, a hackathon before that, a final grad school project.
Right.
And then I've just been interested in the space and working on various projects ever since.
Yeah, no, I think something that from the work that you've done that I've seen, it's really cool because you're able to kind of invoke emotion from people in the experiences that you create. Another project that I think is super interesting was a VR project that you worked on when it was like gender identity. Do you want to talk a little bit about that too? Because I find it just so fascinating.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I did my master's degree in human-computer interaction, which is really, for people that don't know what human-computer interaction is, it's a discipline that integrates computer science / technology with cognitive psychology and neuroscience, so really why we behave the way we do, with design. And the idea is to solve real world problems using design and technology. So the whole degree was really about how can we use technology to, for lack of better words, better society. Right. So a partner that I was working with in a VR seminar approached me, and she had the idea of creating these virtual safe spaces for people to explore their gender identity through avatars. And what we did is we created this platform called True Hue, Discovering the True You, which actually allows people to explore their gender identity through the creation of an avatar of anywhere on the gender spectrum that they want to be. So it's actually non-binary. It's not male or female, but really any characteristic, any trait that you feel is associated with your gender identity, you can do so in a virtual space. And it's not specific just for the trans community. It's specific for anyone in the world that wants to explore their gender identity and also bring in other people in their lives that they want to process something with. Yeah. So the idea is that you go inside of this safe space, this virtual safe space, and through this technique called virtual embodiment, you actually feel a connection to these avatars, and the other participants feel a connection to their avatars. When you can see your hands moving and your body moving inside of a mirror, you can come together in these virtual safe spaces and, process this idea of your own gender identity, and also the loved ones or the colleagues or the classmates that you have in your life can also see you in the way that you see yourself. Yeah.
No, virtual embodiment, there's like actually so much research done on that. It's so real. There's for like phantom people who have like phantom bones, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the rubber hand theory.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that's where people literally wear VR headsets if they lost a limb and they just have pain in their arm because their arm is like contracting, and then putting on a VR headset, they have their full arm again, and they can actually visualize seeing their hand release, and that actually releases the tension in their upper arm.
Wow,
which is
amazing.
So fascinating. And so it really is real, this idea of virtual embodiment and having like real empathy and understanding of yourself using these technologies, which is so cool. And even for myself, I can imagine myself, I have this rule that I set that before I'm 30, I want to shave my head. I want to shave all my hair, not like because of any gender thing, just more because I want to see what it's like to take my hand and rub it through my hair and not have anything there. My entire life, I've always had long hair because I'm a girl, you know, and I kind of just want to see what it's like to not have that. And so I can imagine for myself wanting to use your project to just see what I look like without hair in my head, to actually like visualize my hand touching my head and like just seeing that. I think it's so cool that you actually created that experience that really anybody who just wants to play with like their identity or what they look like, period, has the opportunity to do so without maybe the fear of really doing it first. Yeah. So I think that's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential applications for something like this. It started in an academic setting as something that seemed a bit esoteric at the time. And I think throughout the last year and a half that we had worked on it, and now it's kind of sitting in a state where it needs to be picked back up again. We've gotten a lot of comments from people like you who have a certain application, or other people that we've met, in the academic context, or I gave a keynote in Stockholm back in May.
Nice.
And we had, actually, it was really interesting. Some people came up to me after the presentation and, had shared, certain personal anecdotes that were really touching. And I think for me, just to know that this project can potentially touch people and impact people's lives in a way for the better is worth working on it.
Totally.
And so now it's just about finding a more practical and maybe commercial application. I don't know. We'll see.
You're a busy person, so
yeah. So it's like you have to choose your project.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that what we've seen now in the last year or so with this idea of the metaverse really coming into reality, avatars being present in all different types of arenas, whether it be for commercial usage or for medical usage or for therapeutic usage. There's just so many applications, and it's such an interesting space to be in. So I hope there's a lot more work, either academic or commercial, that we start seeing in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and something that I just love about your work in general and just like who you are as a person, and I hope other people do this too, is just the side of being able to be super creative, super understanding of people and ideas and things, and then creating like real projects with that. And I think that we need more of these kinds of people who are just really have some side, can understand people really well, and then also just apply that to actual applications that invoke just ideas and ways of being that just don't really exist so much. Like a lot of tech that exists, it's kind of to improve people's lives, but not a lot of tech exists to make us feel certain things. And so that's what I think is really cool that you do. And I know that there's so many other people out there too who are also have this creative side of them, but are kind of scared of the tech. So I just want to thank you for like sharing how it's possible to do both things and be a part of both worlds. It's really cool.
Thank you so much for saying that. I do have to say to that point, now that we're, having this intimate conversation, we're talking about the things that have really shaped us. I think one of the biggest things I learned in the last year is that it's okay to feel, and feeling makes us human. We're not robots. We might program them, but we ourselves are very much living a human experience. And if we're able to use technology to really amplify that, to express ourselves, like I did with this project, More Than Words, where we're tokenizing experiences, or with True Hue, where we're able to connect the human and the emotional side to the technology side, we can really, do so much good in the world. And I think that, the more, especially as women, we're sometimes accused as being overly emotional, and so these are things that we shy away from. We're like, no, we're strong. We don't cry. We don't feel things, but we do. And that's okay. And that's valid. So I think once I grew up a little bit and I realized that it's okay. And it's not only okay, it's actually amazing to feel things, to feel happiness, to feel joy, to feel pain, to feel sad, and then learning to use those emotions and pour it into our work to help other people, to help ourselves, but also to help others. I think that that's what's inspired a lot of my projects. But I can tell you that if you had asked me this same thing 5 years ago, I probably would have had a very different demeanor and been a lot less vulnerable than I am able to be today, just because I didn't have I think for myself, the maturity to know that, it's okay to be a human. Like, we're living this human experience. And if we can integrate technology into that, we can really create some amazing things.
Totally. There's a lot of strength and vulnerability.
Definitely.
And even like for the TV show that I went on, that was a whole thing of me being so scared to like talk about these really personal topics, But like for you, just having these opportunities was kind of like you had to build this project, you had to do this thing. And I felt that way too. It was kind of, I had this opportunity of going on the show, and I know that I can represent all these people, so why wouldn't I? You know, and that kind of pushed me to do it. And I'm sure you felt pushed in some ways too. And I'm glad that we both are where we are today, being vulnerable and being strong and kind of speaking for the people that feel like they don't have a voice, to an extent.
Yeah, I think it's amazing what you did, because that does take a lot of strength. I know one thing that I shared when I was in Stockholm, which was something that I never shared before. And again, it was a much smaller audience. It was 700 live people, and it was broadcast on Swedish national television.
Yes.
But again, it's a very,
let's go.
It's a much smaller audience,
right?
But still, it's
a strong, high engagement.
Right.
That matters.
People
Micro-influencers.
People were engaged. But what I wanted to say was back to this True Hue project. So on the topic of being vulnerable, one of the reasons, something I didn't share up until very recently, was when Adi, who was my partner in this project, initially came to me to propose the idea, I felt very uncomfortable with it. I almost didn't want to do it. And she had asked me why, and I had a really hard time explaining it until I really dug deep. And one of the things that I realized that I was afraid to explore my gender identity because when I was 22, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, which is a really common endocrine disorder. Thank you. But I was really embarrassed because I used to have facial hair that I would grow. And I actually had to go through years of like really painful laser hair removal. And I was so embarrassed of it. I was always hiding it. And I was always feeling like, you know, people are going to find out my secret and then I'm going to be less feminine and less of a woman. And if I was in the position to actually see myself with facial hair, even as an avatar, it was like my worst nightmare. It was something that I completely hid from the world, and very few people actually knew, except for people in my immediate family that actually saw me going through this and knew how deeply painful and embarrassing it was for me, especially as a 22-year-old who didn't understand what was going on with my body and my hormones. And then it wasn't until I started speaking openly about this, I had so many other people, so many other women come to me and say, I also have PCOS. Actually, 10% of women have it. So it's quite a large percentage. But I was so afraid to be vulnerable, like you did with the show you went on, talking about your sexuality, talking about the things you're uncomfortable with. But what you've probably realized, which at least I did, is that there's so much power in, you know, talking about these subjects, even though you might feel that they're a bit taboo, or it sets you apart, or it makes you less desirable in certain ways. You're actually impacting so many people to feel normalized for what they too are going through. And I always say, normal is boring. So it's not something we should strive to be. But I think that the sense of belonging to a community of other women in tech, other women who share, you know, different sexual preferences or different physiological differences that we might have that are a little separate from, you know, what the masses are going through. It's important to be able to be vulnerable in order to connect deeper with people on a personal, but also on a professional level as well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. The amount of positive feedback I got from people afterwards, I was like, oh, this is why I did this, you know? And so I totally agree with you. And on the point of boring, one of my favorite quotes is from Marilyn Monroe. And she says that imperfection is beauty, madness is genius, and it's better to be absolutely ridiculous and absolutely boring. So that's kind of in line with what you're saying. And I just want to thank you for coming on this podcast. I kept you, I think, a little long, but I mean, like, there's just so much that you emulate and radiate for everybody to learn from. And I just want to, like, say thank you again for just sharing your wisdom and sharing your experiences. And I hope a lot of more women and more people can really see that it's okay for them to be who they are, put themselves in uncomfortable situations, and explore all aspects of who they are and what they care about. So
thank you so much for having me on the show. And if anyone wants to reach out to me for personal advice or for professional advice, like I said, I love paying it forward. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I guess you might put the handle in the episode. I'm really always happy to help mentor and just, you know, be of assistance in any way possible for people that are, you know, struggling with some of the same things, or even just want to break into the industry or want to grow a bit in the industry as well. I'm always happy to be here and be a resource. So
Awesome.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Also, actually, one more question I forgot to
Yes.
ask. Is there any book or like article or anything that has inspired you that you want to share with people too? Or like, I don't know, movie, song, anything?
Yes. So actually, I believe it is the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great.
Okay.
It's something that I had to read in an internship that I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about these levels of leadership, and he talks about these level 5 leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that was a really new concept to me when I read it.
Mm-hmm.
I was the president of the associate student body when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think I had a very different mentality when it came to the effectiveness of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being a strong leader, not being vulnerable, you know, making sure people are following their tasks. And this talks about a very different level, which is empowering the people that you're
Mm-hmm.
working with.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something
Cool.
I've seen is really effective in my professional life. Again, living in generosity.
Right.
When you're there to empower other people, and your mission in life is, from the projects you create to the way you interact with other people, is really about, you know, empowering others to do their best, because
Mm-hmm.
again, it just lifts everyone up.
Right.
This is like the highest level of leadership that you
Mhm.
can possibly have. So
Cool.
this was a book I read many years ago. I hope I got the title right. Good to
Right.
Great, I believe. I
All
guess
right.
you'll put it in the link.
Yeah, I'll
but,
find it.
But
Yeah.
this for me was a staple and really foundational to my career. So
Cool.
I hope
Thanks for
that
sharing.
everyone can read it, or at least listen to the audiobook. I think that's what I ended up doing.
There's nothing wrong with
So,
listening to audio.
Yeah, we have to. We're on the move. We
Right.
need to, you know, there you go.
Podcasts and such. you know.
Exactly. So if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. But
Cool.
that's the big standout one to me.
All right, so people should follow you on Twitter. I'll put the handle in the captions.
Yes.
And then also LinkedIn. They can connect with you.
Perfect. Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We're done. Let me make sure it recorded.